love to get started here today. So it's really wonderful to have you all here. And we're really excited to have the folks from Software Secure join us today to talk about answering security questionnaires. And I'm not going to say too much more. I'll let Sharif introduce himself. Just to let you know, we are recording these sessions largely for so that you have access to review them on YouTube later on. And we'll be following the sessions with a bit of a questionnaire so we can both help you understand your challenges, but then also see how effective the workshop was. So with that, I will actually hand it over to Sharif.
All right. Thanks, Shoma. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for Queen's University for allowing us to talk a little bit about security, which is obviously one of the things we're very passionate about here at Software Security. So I guess just a kind of like a quick note about the context behind this webinar is we work a lot with B2B companies, and one of the things that we find out is as B2B companies start out, especially technology companies start to work with enterprise clients, one of the first things that happen is this, you get a beautiful Excel sheet with lots of security questions asking about a lot of things that you didn't realize that you're going to face until probably later in your company journey. But it looks like you cannot get there before answering these security questionnaires. While you're trying to focus on sales, getting up the team, building up the product, these companies are asking, they seem to be totally out of sync. They have no idea where you are and asking you a question that seems to be appropriate for a Series A or a Series B type of company. So we saw a need that we can help smaller companies simplify the task, get that first couple of sales going, which would make things a whole lot easier for you afterwards. So that's just a little context behind the need of the security questionnaire and why we decided to work with Queen's University on such a webinar. So just a few housekeeping items here. So as Shoma and Amanda mentioned, this webinar is going to be recorded. Feel free to ask any questions during the webinar. That's how we get the webinar actually very useful for everybody. So after that, we're going to do a bit of introductions, why VSQs are relevant, and I'm going to explain what VSQ means. A little hint at questionnaires, but they have another name that I'm going to reveal in a little bit. How do you master answering those security questionnaires? And just what I'm going to conclude it, and if there's any final questions. So as we mentioned, the slides and recording are going to be available after the webinar. Your mic will be muted, so for now, but unmute at any time, ask questions, or use the Q&A or the chat for the questions. Again, survey will be sent. Please let us know how can we improve this webinar, and how can, if there's also other topics that you would like us to address, secure engineering, penetration testing, design, integrating security from scratch, anything that's related to security that would help you in your journey as an entrepreneur. A little bit about me. I started as a software developer in 1999. Joined OWASP. OWASP stands for Web Application Security Project. It's a non-for-profit organization that aims at making the security application security message, visible to those who are writing and consuming software. Founded OWASP Ottawa in 2007. Helped GIAC and SANS with a bunch of exams and courses. SANS is one of the biggest security educators in the world, and GIAC is the certification arm of that organization. Both of them are non-for-profit. Joined Wells Fargo in 2009 as a information security engineer, which basically I was doing part of the security code review. So I was sitting on the other side of that fence. And one of the things that we were doing is we were the gates between every development team and production, whether internal or external. So Wells Fargo has a lot of developers, but they were also acquiring and implementing software from other vendors. We were that gate between all of those in production. In 2010, we founded Software Secured, which is an application security penetration testing as a service company that helps B2B technology companies continuously ship secure code. And in 2019, I found another company called Reshift, which helps software developers write security in their software development lifecycle. So that's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about Software Secured, but let's get into the meat of this. I just want to run a quick poll by you guys, and I just want to know roughly, have any of you guys have answered security questionnaires before? So got 3 replies so far. Keep trickling in. Great. So it looks like we have 50-50 almost split between people who answered security questionnaires and people who didn't answer security questionnaires yet. But if you are in B2B space, even B2C these days, you will get across security questionnaires one way or the other. Right. So DSQs. Anybody know what DSQ means? So turns out security questionnaires have a name. They call dumb security questionnaires. And it's just not one person. It's actually all over the place. It looks like the alternative name for security questionnaires is DSQ. And people are complaining about them left and right. Security questionnaires are security theater. Security theater, it's a term in the industry that basically means a show, but not real, but there's no real benefit, right? That's what it means. Some people call it dumb. Some people call it that this is really doesn't really answer anything about how secure we are. So in a nutshell, security questionnaires have a really bad reputation, and for a good reason. The truth of the matter is, whether we agree or not, enterprises, bigger companies are always using some form of security questionnaires, whether in an Excel sheet, whether in a nice software, vendor management portal. At the end of the day, there's a bunch of questions that needs to be answered. And as entrepreneurs and as companies that are looking to make a sale for these companies, we need to get over the hump. So let me give you just give you the view from the other side, from why enterprises are doing that. And I usually ask this question: are we better off security-wise, cybersecurity-wise, let's say in the last 10 years? Are we better off? Do you think we are more secure? Applications, doing business online in general, are we better off in 2022 or let's say 2012? What do you think? You guys can use the chat if you'd like. It's hard to answer, right? It's hard to answer, but let's look at some data. So if you look at this chart here, this is the number of CVEs, common vulnerability enumerations, or 0 days, which is 0 days basically a bug that was found in, let's say, a Microsoft or Kubernetes or a product that is pretty common, and there might or might not be a patch ready for it, but not everybody has been patched their product yet. So that's a 0 day. So let's look at these CVEs and the rate by which we were getting CVEs between 2015 and 2020. If you can see in the little diagram here. And you can, if you see in 2015, we're about closer to 10,000 or so. And in 2020, we were 17,000, almost 18,000, right? So 80% more vulnerabilities. Now, there's a lot of reasons behind that. It might be we are not doing as much as we should do as far as security, maybe because there's a whole lot more software that has been released, maybe there's a whole lot more people that are attacking them before, maybe. But all of these gives more reasons to enterprises to scrutinize security even more, being the biggest target for cyber attacks or cyber criminals. if you add to it that 78% of IT security professionals in a typical enterprise setting think that they are lacking confidence in their own company's cyber resilience. They are inside, and despite of all of the budget they have, despite of all of the tools, there's still not enough. 64% of large enterprises affected by a supply chain attack in the last year, and this is where you guys come in, right? In a typical enterprise, they are using lots of software that might not be actually developed in-house, that is brought in from a vendor. Let it be a CRM, let it be a financial, a fintech product, let it be an e-commerce product, HR product. They cannot develop everything, so they have to buy. And cyber criminals figured out that the enterprise itself is doing a lot to stop their cyber attacks, but a very good way to attack them is through their supply chain, which is all of these smaller vendors that might not have enough budget or expertise to secure their own products. Hence, it is easier to attack the enterprise through the supply chain or those little smaller vendors that are selling to the enterprise. There is a very good example here, which is the SolarWinds attack. Not sure if some of you guys heard about it in 2020, but just to give you a quick overview of what that is. So basically, a hacker group believed to be affiliated with the Russian government gained access to computer systems belonging to multiple U.S. government departments, including the U.S. Treasury and Commerce, in a long campaign to believe that has started in March 2020. The news triggered an emergency meeting in the U.S. national security. It was a big deal, especially in the United States. Now, the effect, what happened was that the attack involved hackers compromising the infrastructure of SolarWinds. SolarWinds, that is basically a company that produces a network and application monitoring platform called Orion. And it turns out that this application is being used by a lot of really high profile organizations. 425 out of Fortune 500 companies were affected. They were using SolarWinds. Top 10 US telecommunication companies were using SolarWinds. Top 5 US accounting firms were using SolarWinds. All the branches of the US military, Pentagon, and State Department using SolarWinds. So SolarWinds is not a small company. They did have pretty good security measures, yet it was much easier to attack them and get all of these targets rather than to attack each of those targets individually. So that's basically the reason that enterprises scrutinize vendors. Their way might not be efficient, which is the security questionnaires, but that's what we have to deal with at this point. Just a quick question. How many, for those who answered yes to asking security questionnaires, how many security questionnaires do you typically answer per month? Are we talking 1 to 5, 5 to 10, or 10 plus? For those who have answered security questionnaires before. Okay, so it seems that most people actually, I'll share the results with you guys here. It looks like most people are answering a smaller number of security questionnaires per month, which is a very manageable volume. All right. So, how to master security questionnaires? This is probably why we're all here. So I'm going to talk about how to strategize, how to operate, and how to optimize. Right? Strategizing, laying the necessary foundation. One of the biggest problems I see is that entrepreneurs or CTOs, whoever is answering the security questionnaire, deals with every questionnaire separately, right? Which is the biggest mistake I see people doing, because they are the same, although the questions are a little bit different. They're asking about the same exact information every time. So let's start by laying the necessary foundation. So every time you're answering the security questionnaire, it's a little bit easier. After probably the fifth or 10th questionnaire, somewhere in between that, depending on how much work you put in the foundation, it will be relatively a short, painless exercise. The second thing I'm going to talk about is minimizing the amount of work necessary to ace that questionnaire. And finally, how to refine the workflow so it would be very easy for you to give it to somebody else, so you're not wasting. Once you get bigger a little bit, it wouldn't be that hard to give it to somebody else to answer the security question. You're freeing your time to do something else. While we're here, just want to get a quick feeling on where people are. 3 to 10 people, 10 plus, 1 to 2 people, how big the companies are. It seems like we have a winner. Let me share the results with you. Looks like most companies are between 3 to 10, which is exactly the size where you start to get security questionnaires. You probably have a product. You probably start some sales conversations. You cannot get a POC going unless you actually get the security questionnaire. They don't want to touch your product until they know where you are. And this is where 3 to 10 or even 10 plus can come in. All right. So let's start here strategizing. All right. Let's look at the component in a typical questionnaire. These are the 5 areas that usually companies like to ask about. They come in different forms. Sometimes they're merged, sometimes, but they want to ask about 5 things. They want to ask about your program. They want to see how mature you are. Do you have policies in place? Do you even realize that security is important? And having an information security program, they would ask questions to understand where are you in your journey. Have you considered that before? Where did you consider it in the sense of you have 1 or 2 policies? Do you have 10 policies? Do you have somebody who is dedicated to this? And this is how they measure your maturity as far as overall security. Keep in mind that most of these questionnaires are not just dealing with your software. They want to understand your maturity as a company as a whole, right? The second one is operational security. Operational security is a process, basically, how do you prevent sensitive information from getting into the wrong hands? So while you might, so the security program deals with kind of like your overarching controls on how to do things as far as security, your secure engineering, your onboarding and offboarding, your, for example, training, awareness training, just talking about the policy. And if there is a dedicated person doing that. Operational security talks about the details a little bit. And one of the biggest things is how proactive are you in understanding if you are under attack or if you're just been attacked. So if there was an incident, do you have the capabilities to respond to that incident? If you're under attack today, do you have the capabilities to respond to that attack today, right? So they will ask, you will see them asking about endpoint security, antiviruses, IDSs and IPS, system logs. You would see them asking, for example, what kind of firewall do you have? Do you have denial of service protection, right? So that's basically operational security. Next is information protection, which is all about the data and particularly their data. You want to understand what are you doing for particularly our data? Let's say that you are a multi-tenant environment. Is our data mingled with other people's data? If it's the case, what are you doing to separate us or to know if there was an attack? Would also be? Are we also going to be affected? How would you separate? How would you know that if we're affected or somebody else is affected? Would you even know if a breach happened, right? So, so this is basically all about information protection and about data. And this is where you can see that some of the local or geographic data protections can come in. So if you're selling to somebody in Europe, they'll start asking about GDPR. If you're selling to somebody in healthcare, you'll start seeing HIPAA. If you're selling to somebody in e-commerce, you'll start seeing PCI DSS, because most of the regulations are data driven, right? Next is the audit and assessment. And basically in here, we start getting a lot technical as in, are you doing pen testing? Are you doing infrastructure pen testing, application pen testing? Are you doing any sorts of audits? Are you running any tools? And finally, the physical security, and this is where you get asked about who has access to the workplace. Do you have servers? Obviously, most of you guys are probably on the cloud, but these companies probably haven't gone there, but they ask a lot about these things. So those are the 5 main components in a typical questionnaire. They will have different names. They might be mixed a little bit, but those are usually the 5 areas that they ask about. Security programs, all about policies, and what are you doing from a managerial standpoint? You have somebody dedicated. What's their name? How big is that team, etc. Operational security, which is basically what kind of detection do you have in place? Information protection, a lot of questions about data. Are you encrypting? Are you not encrypting? Where are you encrypting? How you're segregating data, stuff like that. Audit and assessment. Who else can vouch for what you're saying? If we can like summarize that statement, and then finally physical security, your office, your Wi-Fi, laptops. Do you have guests coming into the office? Things like that. Any questions so far? All clear? All right, sounds good. All right, so second is strategizing how huddle and delegate. Now it's a very tedious task. I've answered a lot of security questionnaires myself. It's not fun, right? And most CTOs or most people that answer security questions that I talk to tend to just answer the security questionnaire themselves. Not a lot of delegation going on. And they just have to do it because nobody else would like to do it, because everybody will gonna procrastinate because everybody has a job. But if only one person is doing the questionnaire, then now the load is on that person to get to the finish line. And usually, a lot of cases, not one person has all of the answers, right? They usually what I hear from teams is, well, nobody else would like to do it. But a very good thing to get the team involved is, hey, we're here to create this amazing product to solve that problem for people. In order for us to do that, we have to sell it to these people. In order for us to do that, we have to answer the security question, right? It is as important as actually writing the software. Now you can go and select security champions to be delegated. Perhaps you can have somebody for each of the 5 areas as a security champion to take on that piece and go with it. Next is, eliminate. One of the things that I see is a lot of companies try to answer every single question. Keep in mind that these questions, this questionnaires is one size fits all. Do not feel the need to answer every single question. First thing to ask is does this questionnaire apply actually to my business? Is it relevant to this particular vendor? I'll give you an example. Let's say that you have a CRM, and this CRM has a web portal and has a mobile application. And that vendor is only going to use the web application. So answer the questions that is only relevant to the web application, to the web portal, and do not answer any questions related to the mobile, because they are not going to use the mobile, right? Keep in mind also that your buyer is not the one that is asking those security questionnaires, the security team, right? And the security team is not going to verify all of this information with your buyer. So giving them just the information they need for those security questions is the way to go, right? So I'll give you a question. I'll give you an example. Here's a question: do you maintain controlled access areas for systems that contain Acme's confidential data, right? It looks like a very valid question. But then what is confidential data? What Acme considers as confidential data? Don't make an assumption. It might be straightforward, it might not, right? So clarify, what do you guys consider as confidential data, right? What they might consider confidential data might not be what you consider confidential data. Next is describe security controls implemented to strict physical access to the system. That's a typical security questionnaire example. If you're in the cloud, then you don't have to answer this question because, well, you do not really have access to the physical access, and everybody's using AWS, so you do not need to answer this question because it's talking about physical controls if your server was actually on-prem, right? So eliminate any irrelevant question. If you're not sure, make sure to double check what do you mean by this. As I said, questionnaires are often one size fits all. Avoid the guessing game and clarify any ambiguous questions where the vendor do not feel the need to just answer all of the questions because they might invite actually more questions, follow-up questions. Think of the frame of how this specifically related to your application and your business relationship with the vendor. Do not speak in a abstract manner, but basically what would apply to that particular vendor. So for example, here's a question. Please detail policies surrounding bring your own device on the network. Do you allow employees to work from home? Are they using company provision systems that meet the security guidelines, right? And a typical answer would start to detail everything that you're doing as far as bring your own device, using company provision systems that meet your security guidelines. But you need to just step back a little bit. But the people that are actually going to touch systems that bring to that vendor, are they bringing their own devices? Are they working from home? Are they using company provision? Are they touching any sensitive data related to that vendor? If the answer is no, 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 then you just need to say, instead of writing a detailed policy and answering the question as an engineer would answer very detailed, say none of the employees working on this engagement have access to any confidential data, and just closes the question right there, right? Instead of writing an essay to answer that particular question. Any questions so far? All right, sounds good. All right, let's go into operating. One of the things to keep in mind, you are not being evaluated, right? It is not about you. It is about the risk profile of using your product, right? It's about the risk profile of using your product. It's not about you. So the first thing that you have to think about, the company, what are they providing your vendor, your client, your prospective client, what are they providing you? How can you make them feel comfortable within the security controls that you have? And we're going to talk about that, right? So the first thing is map out your data access and control picture. We wouldn't be doing all of that if your application wasn't processing their data, your client's data, in some shape or form, right? So at the end of the day, it's all about data, right? So one of the things that you can do to make your life a whole lot easier is define the data that you're collecting from them. What is the life cycle of that data? What happens since it leaves the client until it's actually stored, if it's being stored, and then served back? And then finally, what controls do you have in place to protect that data? Let it be encryption, let it be, for example, some people, they come to us and say, hey, I'm answering the security questionnaires. They are asking about the amount of service. They ask about this, they ask about firewall. We don't have any of this stuff. And I asked them, they're using Cloudflare. They say, yes. I said, well, you have a lot of this stuff. Just check what Cloudflare is providing you, right? Who has access to this data? How will access be managed during the answer development process? Have a clear understanding of your availability, confidentiality, and integrity controls. So understanding what are you collecting, the life cycle of that data from starting from when it leaves the client until it's being collected and served back to them, the controls that you have in place, and then use those controls to answer. You'll have a very good overview how to answer all of the security constraints. Now, let me remind you, it's not about you, it's about the risk. And there are 4 ways to deal with risk: eliminating risk, delegating risk, mitigating risk, accepting risk, right? So keep in mind that your client is not asking you to be risk-free. They're not asking you to ace every single question. They know that nobody gets to like eliminate every single risk. Even if you put in your security questionnaires actually that you're doing everything properly, I'll probably question that because nobody is. So don't feel the need or the urge to just ace every question. There are 4 ways to deal with risk: eliminate, delegate, mitigate, and accept. Eliminate is basically the simple one, erasing the risk completely. Erasing the risk completely. So for example, denial of service. Denial of service is a problem. Yes, it's a problem. I have this tool, right? That's one way to deal with it, to eliminate the risk. So I have this tool, it kills the risk completely. It eliminates the risk completely. There is another way to deal with risk, which is delegating the risk, which is transferring the responsibility of the risk to another control. I'll give you an example. Let's say that your authentication, username and password, you do not save any usernames and password, but you use Gmail or Google to actually do that for you. So in this case, you delegated the risk of verifying the identity of the user to somebody else that is known, industry known to be okay at doing that, right? So that's delegating risk. Mitigating risk is not completely eliminating the risk. It still exists, but it's not as bad as before, right? So reducing the risk through a compensating control. And let me give you an example. Let's say that an IDS, intrusion detection system. Let's say you do not have an IDS, right? So you wouldn't know if there is somebody trying to attack you. And let's say for your particular setup, it's very hard to add. But perhaps you have logs, and perhaps you have you're monitoring those logs frequently. That can act as a compensating control to mitigate this. So if you're under attack and you commit that you would be reviewing the logs quite often, that can reduce the risk that you wouldn't know if you're actually under attack today, right? Finally, accepting risk is you can say something like, let's say that you have a long session window. So after your users log in, you let them log in for, I don't know, 3 days, right? Which is not an industry standard. Usually it should be less than 60 minutes. And in a lot of cases should be actually less than 30 minutes. But you let them for 3 days. And let's say that you don't want to change that for some reason, right? For a lot of clients, that might not be okay. It might be needed to be reduced to less than 30 minutes. And you might want to accept that risk, but you need to justify it. Why? And you might want to combine it with a mitigating risk. Let's say that the actual risk is not in logging in too long, it's actually in performing a control. So I'll give you an example. Amazon lets you browse without having to relog it, right? But only when you get to take an action on an existing order or to make a new order, this is when they force you to relog, right? So this way, they have a business requirement that a customer does not need to relog in every time they visit Amazon, but at the same time, they mitigate the risk from any fraud or any attack against their users by forcing the client to relog in once they are about to do a more sensitive transaction, such as make an order or cancel an order, right? Any questions so far? All right, sounds good. What happens if you're missing controls? What happens if you don't have a good answer? You know that this is, you have a big risk and you don't have anything and you don't have a good answer. The best way to go is being open and honest with the vendor. This transparency can help build trust. Don't just say, no, I don't have that. Say, I don't have today, but we're planning to do this in the next X number of months, right? That's the best next answer, the next best answer. Look for simple ways to eliminate, mitigate, or delegate. So this is where we mentioned before, understand the controls that you have. If you're part of AWS, there's a lot of things that are part of you. Azure is the same way. If using Cloudflare, there's a lot of things that you can just simply add by a touch of a button. So make sure that you exhausted all of these by any cloud tool that you're using before you answer no. But if the answer is actually no, being open and honest is the way to go. If you accepted risk, make sure that you have strong justification point and have a plan. If you feel that the justification is strong for you but might not be strong for the client, have a backup plan saying, but we're planning to change this in the next 6 to 12 months or whatever. And finally, optimizing. Tips on refining your process. Don't treat each questionnaire separately. If you start to think at it as a process, you will find that you're answering the same things again and again. It is just being asked a little bit differently. Create a library of answers, and rather than rewriting a new answer, enrich an existing one. It's much easier to just go and treat each one separately and answer the question over again, and just get it over with. But hey, you're gonna get another one in a couple of weeks. So you might as well look at your previous answer, enrich it so that it can answer this question as well. And sooner than you think, you will find that you have a library of really good answers that covers a lot of questions, right? That's pretty much everything I had for this webinar. Hopefully that helped you guys think of security questionnaires as like we make it a little bit simple for you to answer security questionnaires, and give you a process how to tackle security questionnaires and spend less and less time as you cover it, as you get more of them.
Well, thank you. This has been very helpful.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Kevin.
Can you give me an example? What do you do about the questions that you are required answers? Like sometimes you'll get those silly ones, like what is your age? Like that's relevant. I mean, and you won't let you get past that. It's a required field. I think that's odd, but you'll find some surveys with that.
I mean, I haven't come across one that asked these kind of questions, but again, feel free to ask what is the required, the age of who, right? The CEO, the answer of the question, the person that's answering the question.
Yeah, the person answering the question. You're filling out a questionnaire, and you get one of those required fields that you think, one, I'm not comfortable saying that, and two, I'm not sure it's necessary for the purpose of the survey. But it's a required field.
I would qualify it. It looks like it's more of the software that is trying to segment their users more than the vendor actually want to know.
Yeah, I agree.
But all right, it doesn't. I usually get the Excel sheet ones. I don't get a piece like I rarely get that software that's asking me required question. I usually get a security Excel sheet. As Excel sheet with security questionnaires, and I haven't seen that. So I would go back and say I'm not comfortable asking this question.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that related to? Yeah.
You just thought it was odd. It's like, how's that relevant?
It is odd.
Okay. All right.
It is
thanks.
odd. Yeah.
I have a quick question. The it's a little bit unclear. I mean, you know, everything you're saying effectively presumes you're going to just spend the time with whatever arbitrary thing they send you. And I'm just wondering whether there are ways to reduce that down. For instance, having a document talking about your security posture, and then offering to answer any questions that are not answered in that document.
That's great. That's actually a great way to do it. If you have that document, which actually most of the reason that I didn't start with it is most companies do not have that document. Once you have those answers and enrich them every time, that can actually go, you will find that you already have that document. You can put it in, you have the pieces of the document. Now you can put it in a Word document and send it to clients. It is not a guarantee that people will not still send you security questionnaires, because at the end of the day, they have a process that they need to follow. And those questions have to be answered in their own way because it goes into their own system. but at least you might eliminate the need to answer a bunch of them. But that's a very good way to do it, Mike. Absolutely. Great, that was fun. This is how you guys can reach out. Oh, where am I? Here. So you got my email here or through Amanda and or Shoma. Please reach out if you have any other questions. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks,
for your
guys.
time this morning.
Yeah, my pleasure. Take care.